You don't need to save your nostalgia for your social media feeds or to find your style. You can take those moments that defined you and turn it into a unique style identity that you can wear every day, one that no one else can replicate. Grab your cup of tea and let's dive into it. The visual identity for your personal brand does not need to just be based on aesthetics. It can be deeply rooted in meaning and who you are as a person. This is what the best branding understands. If you haven't noticed, the idea of nostalgia is one of the most dominant cultural forces at the moment. From the trend of bring back 2016 to the trend of mum, what were you like in the 90s, all over TikTok and on Instagram, people are craving nostalgia. And people like Gen Zers, for example, are often borrowing this nostalgia from other generations. We're craving a different time. And it's actually not that much of a surprise that nostalgia would become such a dominant trend because it is one of the most powerful emotions that we can experience. So let's make sure that we fully understand what nostalgia means, because I remember learning more about the root origin of the word nostalgia when I was younger, and it really resonated with me because there are two key parts to this that I think often do get missed. Cambridge, for example, defines nostalgia as a feeling of pleasure and sometimes slight sadness at the same time as you think about things that happened in the past. So it is not just about sadness and craving times past, but also about the pleasure that comes from that. And brands have long understood this. During my 15 years working in marketing and communications, I can tell you that nostalgia is deeply rooted in most good brand strategies. It is the guiding DNA for some of the biggest initiatives that you undertake. It's reminding yourself where you come from and how you can take that history and your heritage and bring that into the future. So this is why you see so many brands either leading this trend or jumping onto this trend. So they are reviving old products, for example, or old visuals and campaigns. But why should brands be the only one to have all the fun when it comes to nostalgia and bringing that into their present and future? And that is what I want to talk about in today's episode. I want to talk about all of the little ways that I like to incorporate nostalgia into my personal style so that I am constantly reminding myself who I am in that process of who I am becoming. My sister at my wedding, when she was giving a speech, said, Dee Dee is the most sentimental person you will ever meet. So for me, I absolutely love this trend of nostalgia because it is what I've always done. So let's talk about how you can bring those everyday defining moments into your present. My point number one is to have a personal style archive. And all this really is reframing how you see your wardrobe. This was something that really occurred to me when I was watching interviews for the Sex and the City spin-off and Just Like That, where the people from the wardrobe department, or Sarah Jessica Parker, who played Carrie in Sex and the City, would often refer to Carrie's clothing archives. So the archive of clothing from the original Sex in the City series. And this just completely changed the way that I started to see a wardrobe in general. I've always been one to not chase trends, and I love to dress in a really classic and timeless way. So I'm not the kind of person who is constantly always trying to update my wardrobe with the latest fashion. I can be super comfortable, for example, in things that are many, many years old. And especially because I moved into a new house with my husband recently, it's changed the way that I see my wardrobe. So I now see it as this archive. And if you were to do this for yourself, if you aren't already. This means that you aren't constantly chasing trends. You have a stronger sense of who you are. You have self validation in your experiences. But this also doesn't need to mean that you are hoarding and keeping absolutely everything. For example, in Maria Kondo's book, The Life Changing Magic of Tidying Up and Spark Joy, she highlights that what you keep should be about asking yourself, does this spark joy? And when you look at your wardrobe from this personal archive perspective, that is where it can be really powerful because you wore that clothing in some of the most defining moments of your life. They were a part of your journey into who you were becoming. Actually, as I say this now, I remember that my sister and I often like to tease my mum for some of the clothing that she got rid of from the 80s and 90s that we would have absolutely loved to have worn now. And that is because she was updating her wardrobe. She didn't see that a lot of that stuff would be valuable to someone in the future because we are always looking at that next thing that we are buying. But when you see your clothing as this archive, it can really change both your style identity and your decisions. So, for me, the second way that I integrate my experiences into my visual style identity is by conserving my over a decade of experience in fashion. So, as I've shared on this channel before, I spent about 13 years working in retail. And 11 of those years, over 11 of those years, were with the brand Kookai, which is originally a French-based label, which became an absolute Australian icon. And the Australian-owned label now is now a global icon. It is just continuing to grow. But for me, this was the place that I called home for over a decade of my life, from the time I was 19 years old. And so much of the clothes that I have from that period still dominates my wardrobe today. And now when I look at things, I never really see it as being too old or too vintage, but I remember that feeling of wanting something so badly when I'd seen it in a campaign or on the runway or before it actually came in, and then finally being able to buy it and loving it so much. And so I try to remind myself of that when I do look at my clothing archive and see the memories that those pieces represent. The person that I was when I was dreaming of my future, not actually knowing how that would turn out. And so I love integrating a lot of those pieces into my everyday outfits. Now, like I said, it still dominates my outfits. I normally always have at least some element of that part of my life on. Whether I try to or not, it's just a natural part of my wardrobe. So for example, actually, this belt that I'm wearing at the moment today, that is actually a Kookai belt as well. So it's really nice to be able to just bring that part of my life into my everyday now as well. My tip number 3 to add meaning to your everyday style is to integrate family heirlooms into your wardrobe. My grandma and dad passed away a few years ago, within about 10 months of each other. And it was a shock to the system, to say the least. But I remember at the time, one of the things that brought me the most comfort and also the most joy was to go through some of their things and see how I could bring them in to my everyday life so that it could actually feel, in a fun way in some ways, like they were still with me. So for example, if you follow my YouTube channel, you might know that I wear this blazer a lot in a lot of my videos. But this isn't actually a blazer that I wear just to jump on the latest oversized boxy trends. This was actually my dad's blazer that he wore to my sister's wedding. And it has become probably one of the most important pieces in my entire wardrobe. Off camera, I wear this all the time. It is one of my favorite go-to pieces now. And I also, for example, wear some of my grandma's jewelry. This bangle, for example, or one of these bangles that you may notice that I wear in all of my videos because I wear it every day, was also my grandma's bangle. And I have other jewelry that I wear that was hers as well. But you also don't need to save all of your meaningful personal style for people that have passed away. So, for example, more recently, my sister and I have spent more time going through my mum's jewelry, for example, and the things that we have in our own family archive, our family heirlooms. And I've started to wear more things that she doesn't want anymore, but she would love for us to have, and that I also love, and that aligns with my own personal style. So, for example, this necklace is also my mum's, and the cross is my grandma's, but the chain is my mum's. And thinking outside of the box as well, I also wear a leather jacket all the time that was my uncle's. So, when it comes to the idea of circular fashion, remember that this can start in your own family as well. My number 4 is to freeze moments in time. Now, some of your clothing or some of the items that you may have as a part of your personal style might remind you of certain relationships, but you can also hone in or zoom in on the moments that you cherish the most and make that a part of your personal style. So, the moments themselves that defined you, not just the relationships. I often love to wear the jumper that my husband was wearing on the night that I met him, which he let me borrow when it was getting really cold. And to this day, over a decade on, it is still one of the most important pieces in my wardrobe. I also still have and like to wear on some occasions the basketball top that I had when I met him. So while other brides were sleeping in super cute pajamas for their wedding, I was actually going to bed and waking up in the basketball top that I was wearing when I met my husband. And something else that I bring into my everyday from our wedding is this lipstick that you may see me wear all the time, which is a Tom Ford lipstick that I wore on my wedding day. It wasn't actually the first time that I had worn that lipstick. I had actually worn it to my sister's wedding, and my husband absolutely loved it then, and I had been wearing it for a while, but it became just even more special when I wore it on our wedding day. So it is the only lipstick that I am constantly rebuying because it has this really important memory attached to it. But number 5, to change gears a little bit, is merchandise with meaning. Have you ever had that feeling where you are experiencing something, and even in that moment, you know that it is iconic. You know that you are experiencing a part of history. That is how I felt when a few years ago I went to a Guns N' Roses concert. And I remember watching Slash throughout that concert, doing what he does best, and quite literally feeling like it was taking my breath away. Now, I am not the kind of person who would just buy merchandise at anything. It is only if I have had a truly memorable experience. And that is what my husband and I felt when we were buying our t-shirts after the show. And I still love to wear that t-shirt and to remember that experience, because I remember at the time it also reminded me of growing up in this music obsessed household, and my dad, for example, who would play the guitar every day until the day he died, and I wanted to capture that feeling. And probably the only other merchandise that you will more often see me in is my Denver Nuggets merchandise. So a jumper and a t-shirt in particular that I have from their 2023 championship. So when they won this absolutely lit up our household, as my husband shares the same Serbian background as Nikola Jokic, and we absolutely love him and the team. And I remember how excited he was when he was buying up everything that he could in terms of the merchandise because it was attached to this really special moment. So, whether it is a concert t shirt or your favorite sports team, merchandise is a really nice way to, instead of just wearing generic printed clothing, of communicating who you are, what you enjoy. It tells a story about you that something generic couldn't ever do. If you want more ideas on how you can curate your visual identity, then make sure you check out my previous episode on this topic. Thanks so much, and I'll see you in the next episode.